We're live. Oh, it started. I'm sorry. Okay. I didn't realize we started. Excuse me. Usually counts us in. Good evening, everyone. This is Brian Russ, Superintendent of Schools. I'd like to welcome you this evening and thank you for coming out. I know you have very busy schedules. There's a lot going on. And I just want to start off by thanking everyone for their ongoing support. As you're well aware, this is a work in progress, and we've been working on it over the last several months. There's a lot of moving parts, and we are proud of what we've put together, and we really believe it's in the best interest of our students at this point in time. I think many of you are aware that we were required to come up with 3 plans, and one is a full return to school, which we're not able to do at this time, a full remote, which would not allow kids to come back to school, and then a hybrid model, which we're working on right now. And so before we go any further, I'd just like to let you know that we are at the middle school, and all 10 of us are together. We are social distance, and we're using masks. We also have the barriers that we'll be using in the classroom on our tables. And so, again, I just want to thank you. I know how difficult and challenging this is for parents in a number of ways. There's fear about the disease itself, and stress and anxiety about coming back to school in a very altered way. But I want to let you know that we are doing everything we possibly can to make the experience for your child as meaningful as possible. And so the teachers and our task force, our administrators, and our Board of Education have been working really hard, like I said, over the last several months to put this plan together for you. And I'm grateful that you took the time to submit questions, which we'll be answering in just a few moments, and also for taking the time out of your day to be here this evening. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to our moderator, Mark Manfredi, who is the Director of Curriculum Instruction and Personnel. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. So just everyone knows kind of what we'll be doing here today. We're going to start off by briefly going over 3 PowerPoints, one for each building's reopening plan. Those PowerPoints are listed on the district's website under the COVID page, and also were gone over in much more detail at last week's board administrative retreat. And that video is also online at that COVID page. So a further in-depth will go from there. Once we get through those presentations, which will set the stage and answer some of the common questions, we'll then go into the questions that were submitted. Due to the sheer number of questions that were submitted, I've done my best to kind of group them by common theme or common question, and then pick one that I felt represented the questions or the nuances of the larger group. We're going to work in interest of time from kind of biggest questions down to smaller or individual questions, and ultimately anything that is building department or obviously child specific. Please work with your child's building principal. But we're going to try and move through as much content as we can today. So instead of going into longer discussions, we're going to try and give briefer but substantial answers to these, understanding that the true explanation may be longer and more nuanced than what we're able to provide in this forum. For those of you that also were here this morning or this afternoon, many of the questions will be the same because across all three groups, common themes continue to pop up from parents, but there are some new questions that have been submitted, and we'll try and get to those as well. If you need follow-up or more information from any question, at any time, obviously reach out to the superintendent or your child's building principal. There's also a new website or email address we've created called reopen@eak12.org, reopen@eak12.org. That email address will be open during tonight's presentation if you want to submit a question or need clarification or nuance. It's not for a secondary or parallel conversation, but just to add further clarification. And that website or that email will stay open actually all year long and be monitored all year long. It's a central housing of questions that will then be forwarded to the appropriate personnel. So what we're going to do now, and at the end of today's presentation, just so you know, all three of these will be posted to the website to be viewed in their entirety when we get there. So the first thing we're going to do is just kind of take a sky-high view of each building and how it plans to operate for the fall. And the first person that's going to do that is our Parkdale principal, Jess Lyons.
Okay, here's our building-specific reopening plan. This is available on our website, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I'm going to hit on some highlights, especially those questions were asked, and some of those answers are in this presentation. So the rationale, one of the questions we've been receiving is why is Parkdale going for sending students half days for 4 days and not going in line with the middle and high school? So in that decision, we felt it was important for younger children to have the consistency of being in the classroom as many days as possible for that routine structure and the in-person contacts with their classroom teacher. Teaching of new content in ELA and math will occur by the classroom teacher, with reinforcement and supplementary activities being completed at home. That will put some less responsibility on the parents at home to be teaching those new concepts in those foundational skills of ELA and math. Students will not be moving in the hallways to specials, lunch, rec. This will minimize their exposure to other areas of the building and other students. Basically speaking, they'll be spending those 2.5 hours in their classroom and or outside and will not be moving about the building. Being in the building for a half a day will reduce the amount of time that younger students will have to wear a mask. So they'll only have to wear a mask. It's not even for the full 2.5 hours. We'll have mask breaks. And when teachers take their classes outside, they will be able to remove their masks. And in general, lunch, recreation, specials, those will not occur in those 2.5 hours. They tend to be very social time for students, and these just would not look the same as they normally would pre-COVID. Our schedule is here. I'm not going to go through that again. I think that's been communicated in a variety of avenues. We are looking to make some exceptions to the AM/PM sessions for students with special needs. And for families with extenuating circumstances, I did send out a survey. That's why we asked that it be completed by tomorrow so that we can begin to move students around and finalize the class list. Our sample schedule. We are coming up with a sample schedule. If you click on that link here, it'll lead you to a sample schedule. I'll just briefly review the grade 3 if a student was attending in the afternoon sessions. So they would have a dedicated time for specials from 9 to 9:30. These will be live streamed by the librarian, the phys ed teachers, the art teachers, music teachers at those times. They will also provide recorded lessons for those students that are unable to watch it live due to childcare or lack of technology reasons at 9 o'clock in the morning. We have another dedicated block of time for any students receiving AIF and support services. If students do not receive those services, the teacher will provide enrichment activities or extra practice on the Google Classroom. More specials from 10:10 to 10:40, and then there will be some chunks of time in there where students will either complete work that was sent home the previous day, reinforcement, supplementary activities, science, social studies, Google Classrooms assignments, and such. And then if you scroll above this, there's examples for AM, and then there's also an example of what a Wednesday would look like, and I will get to that in a little bit. Prior to September 10th, we will schedule times for kindergarten students and any families that are new to the district. They will have an opportunity to come into Parkdale, meet their teacher, and get a little mini tour of Parkdale. And our class list, I know usually the families know their child's teacher by now, but we are waiting on the results of that survey to finalize those class lists, and we will make notification as soon as possible. Transportation, self-explanatory. We're reducing the number of students on the bus, receiving them in certain seats to socially distance. And during the AM and PM run, we have an hour and a half. So we will take this morning students home, and then we will have time to clean the high-touch areas, such as the railings. They tend to touch the top of the sides of the seats between the AM and PM run. And because the bus will look completely different for all students this year, we are going to work on a bus safety video for all students to watch at home prior to the first day of school. We are anticipating an increase in parents driving their students to school. So we will have a designated location and procedure for students or for parents who drop off their students. So it's just a work in progress that will be communicated as soon as it's finalized. We'll have staff outside to ensure social distancing. We'll release the students one bus at a time. And I don't know if you've ever been to Parkdale at arrival. We have about 400 kids coming through the Girard Avenue entrance. We will have designated doors around the building for each grade level to enter. Those doors will be the ones that are closest to their classroom. Dismissal, similar procedures to arrival. We will also be having the teachers escort their classes to the bus for dismissal to ensure that social distancing. Cleaning and disinfecting. We will be following the hygiene and sanitation requirements from the CDC. We are installing hand sanitizers in each classroom and throughout the building. Our students will take hand washing breaks during the half day upon entry into the building, before snack, and after returning inside from outdoors. Another big question we did receive was how will the classrooms be cleaned between the AM and PM sessions? We plan on disinfecting them with electrostatic sanitizing sprayers, and high-touch areas, including desk surfaces, chairs, door handles, sink handles, shared objects will also be sanitized during that hour and a half between classes. Multi-stall bathrooms will be disinfected more often. Drinking fountains are bottle fill-up purposes only. We will be sending home breakfast and lunch for families who qualify for free and reduced meals, as well as any families that decide to purchase breakfast and or lunch on any given day. We will be communicating with you an online ordering system, and then we'll send whatever you order home with your child in their backpack. Movement in the building. Our movement is very limited since the students will only be there for 2.5 hours, and they will not be moving about the building very much. But for any movement there is, we do have designated staircases for up and down and walking outside when possible. In the classroom, we will have a maximum of 12 students in any given classroom. We're It'll be right around 12, no more than 12. Desks will be spaced 6 feet apart with protective 3-sided barriers on each desk. Each student will have their own 3-sided barrier, and barriers will be changed out. So if Johnny's in the morning session, he has his own barrier. When he leaves, we'll put it away and bring out Susie's, who will sit at that desk for the afternoon session. And of course, all the surfaces, chairs, high-touch areas in the elementary classroom will be sanitized between sessions. Masks will be worn by students and staff. We're also looking into purchasing the face shields for staff also, so the students can see their teachers' faces, especially the younger students when they're working on letter formations and sound, be able to see their teachers, the way their lips move and how to make a sound. And we will have areas and times for mask breaks. Those include, but aren't limited to, when the student's sitting at their desk, 6 feet apart with their barrier, and also when they go outside. At 3rd and 4th grade, our teachers team teach. That means 2 teachers team. One teacher teaches English language arts to both classes. The other one is math. And for these, the teachers will be switching rooms, not the students. I've had a couple of emails about supply lists. I know we sent those out in June, and if you did already buy those supplies and you don't have your receipt, there's no worries. We will use all of those supplies, but we are in the process of modifying them. And those will be reposted to our website and sent out later this week. Our special area teachers will be visiting the classrooms to introduce themselves at the beginning of the school year. They will have a special area Google Classroom for each grade level. They will be offered synchronously, as I said earlier. That means live in person on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And we will have recorded videos on Wednesdays, and a schedule will be sent with the days and times. And we're still working on a schedule for band and orchestra for our 4th graders that will be communicated as soon as we finalize it. Support services, AIS, very similar to specials. They will also be visiting the classrooms to introduce themselves. They will have Google Classrooms, and if your student receives these services, they will be set up on a schedule for synchronous instruction or small group instruction. And they will also be recording and posting videos to the Google Classroom for those who cannot watch it live. Every student will receive a Chromebook, grades K through 4, whether you are choosing the hybrid model or the 100% virtual. We will be transporting the Chromebooks back and forth to school. Chargers will be kept at home. And if you do not have internet access at home, please contact our main office. Communication is very important through these unprecedented times. I will continue to use the school messenger system to send out updates via email and text. Teachers will be using email, phone calls, and the Remind app to communicate with parents. Google Classrooms will be used. Each classroom teacher will have their own Google Classroom. So that will change from the spring. The whole Google Classroom was by grade level, but this time each teacher will be having their own. And then, as always, please do not hesitate to reach out to your child's classroom teacher with any questions, or myself, or concerns regarding your children's schooling. And we will have a greeter station at Parkdale. So we do ask that visitors are limited in their entrance into the building. But when you do come to Parkdale, you will notice that you will be buzzed in the first set of large wooden doors, and you will turn to your left to visit the greeter station. You will not turn right to enter the main office. And these are just some websites that we have used as guidance in developing all of our plans. I'm all set.
Excellent. Thank you, Jess. And again, we're going to break down in some more detail as we go into the further questions, but we just wanted to set the stage at this time. Both Mr. Brown and Mr. Roberts will show their presentation. Here we go.
Okay. All right, should be on the screen. Okay. So yes, this is, Matt Brown from the middle school, Mr. Roberts here from the high school. We're going to walk through. We're actually just going to show the middle school presentation because there's so many similarities between the middle school and high school. So Mr. Roberts will just jump in, and the two of us will do our best to explain. And we'll skip through a few of the slides because some of the slides are identical to Parkdale. So first of all, the hybrid schedule, and this really is grades 5 through 12. We will have one cohort labeled the blue group will be in-person learning on Mondays and Tuesdays, and then they will be remote Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then the red group, the other cohort of students with the last name L to Z, will have remote learning Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and they will be in-person learning on Thursday and Friday. One note is the EMS bell schedule is there. We have not made a major change to the schedule by any means. The students will still follow their 8 periods. However, we did make a minor adjustment to the bell schedule by adding lunches. We have 4 lunches now, where each grade level will have lunch just with their grade level, and I'll explain that a little bit later. One important note at the bottom is that the blue group of students will have their first in-person day on Thursday, September 10th, and the red group, their first in-person day will be Friday, September 11th, and this will really be used for safety orientation, and then that following week is when we'll really start the instruction. Mr. Roberts, anything to add?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Brown. Good evening, everyone. Just similar to the middle school, the high school bell schedule and our traditional schedule will stay intact. There may be some minor changes to the amount of time that students are given to get from one class to the next, and some changes to our activity period. And what will be expected of our students during that time. But in general, the schedule is very, very similar to what our students have experienced in the past.
Okay, and this is just a quick grid just showing the example of the in-person learning for the blue group on Monday and Tuesday, and for the red group on Thursday, Friday. Some of the rationale, obviously, first and foremost, this reduces the number of students in the building by at least 50%. So this will really help us with our social distancing measures. Part of the reason why we chose the Monday, Tuesday model, and then Thursday, Friday, as opposed to every other day, is we are going to follow a traditional A through F 6-day cycle. And we felt it was important that students are here 2 consecutive days because, for example, at the middle school, the student has pretty much the same schedule, ACE day, and then they have their different schedule, BDF day. So by being here for 2 consecutive days, they're guaranteed to have all of their schedules or all of their special classes and those classes that meet every other day. They will have all of those classes per week, which is something that we found to be very, very important. And continuing there, during the time that students are not present for in-person instruction, I think we'll speak a little bit more about this later, but they will engage in teacher-led remote instruction consisting of videos, projects, paper and online assignments, and as capabilities develop, live streaming some direct instruction. One thing that's very important to note is that during the remote learning of this hybrid model, students will, or teachers will take attendance. We will monitor, the progress, but the students will need to check in and attendance will be taken. And then lastly, as the school year gets going, and I think we'll touch on this later as well, some students with high needs or with special accommodations and services may, depending on teacher input and parents, may experience an increase in the in-person learning when this is feasible to take place. Mr. Roberts, anything to add there?
Just some further clarification on bullet number 1, because I know it's a question that a lot of our students and parents have. When our students are on site, they're going to follow a traditional schedule. When they are at home, they will be expected to tune in to Google Meet classes in the core areas of social studies, English, science, and math. And the reason why those subjects were chosen is because, as of this point, the expectation is there will still be Regents exams in those areas and AP exams in those areas with no flexibility in the curriculum. So we'll have live instruction, whether it's viewing at home or in person, on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And there'll be flexibility in the curriculum in the elective areas and those non-required courses that we can adjust for on the days that students are not in session with us.
And just the one thing to add, Mr. Roberts is right on. At the middle school, we have 5 core classes. So in 5th and 6th grade, it's reading, ELA, science, social studies, and math. And in 7th and 8th grade, it's English, science, social studies, math, and their foreign language of either Latin or Spanish. Prior to September 10th, like Mrs. Lyons said, we are going to provide an opportunity for 5th grade students and their families to come in small groups and tours, to have a tour of the building and meet with some of the staff. Once we have identified the dates and times, we will let you know for sure. And we will also include students who are new to our district, that are new to the middle school. And like Mrs. Lyons said as well, there is obviously a delay in our student schedule. We're hoping to get that out as soon as possible, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. But we're definitely working through the scheduling process as we speak.
Only additional information there is the high school will have an orientation program. It will not look like the program that we've had in the past. We'll be inviting students only to small group orientation sessions of approximately an hour, where they'll be able to meet the school counselors and a few teachers, and we'll walk them through their schedule and introduce them to the building. That'll be for new students and for freshmen. And I know Mr. Brown is going to do the same. We'll also have an opportunity for students who feel a need or a want to get a sense of what school is going to look like, and they have some anxiety around that transition. We'll have opportunity for those students to come and get a sense of what school will look like. And we just ask parents to reach out to either the middle school main office or the high school main office to arrange that. And preferably that would be not this week, but next week.
Okay, transportation, we're going to skip that slide because Ms. Lyons handled that one very well. Arrival at the middle school look a little bit different. We will use 4 different doors, and there will be in-temperature readings. Parent drop-off will still take place at the North Grove. And I'm just going to skip ahead of this slide. Any students who walk or are dropped off or ride their bike to school, typically in the past, if they arrived before 7:45, they went to the cafeteria, and then at our 7:45 bell, they all went up to the homeroom. What we're going to do this coming year to start the year off is identify more than just the cafeteria as a location for students to go. We'll communicate that to you before school starts. But one example might be 8th graders go to the multipurpose room, 7th graders to the rubber gym that we have, and then maybe 5th and 6th graders go to the cafeteria in social distance. So we're working on that plan now as we speak. One thing that's very nice, if you have not been to the middle school recently, the sidewalk has been redone. So I know many students unfortunately started their day off by stepping in a mud puddle. When they were dropped off, we had those huge mud puddles. Those are gone now. And our sidewalk is really nice from Main all the way back to the parking lot. So we're hoping that increases the space that parents will use to drop off their students, and it'll make it just move a little bit quicker, because we do anticipate that there may be more drop-offs this coming year. Students who ride the bus, we will release 1 bus at a time through 2 separate entrances, just to decrease the gatherings of large groups. Mr. Roberts, anything?
Yeah, at the high school, although a different building, similar expectations with releasing 1 bus at a time at various entrances. That's will also be true for parent drop-off, and I'll communicate those details as we get closer to the start of school. One more piece of information: when our high school students arrive for early period, they're going to be going directly to that early period class. I think it's on a later slide, but we will not be using our lockers, at least for the start of the school year. So again, early period students will get off the bus and go right to early period. And the students that come in on the second bus run for what would typically be activity period and homeroom, that change will be students who will go directly to their first period class. We'll have homeroom built in to first period, and that's a minor change for this school year.
And that is something at the middle school that we're following suit, where we're making the schedules for the students. They will still go to homeroom, but their homeroom will be the same as first period in almost all circumstances. There are going to be some slight modifications to that, but what we're trying to do is just decrease the number of touch points and the number of times that students will be in the hallway. At Dismissal, very similar. They'll use multiple doors. We'll have teachers and staff members out there to encourage the social distancing, and we will just take a look through the vehicle flow logistics as this happens. We will make adjustments as needed. Next up is the cafeteria. So the cafeteria at the middle school, if you've been here, you know that it's fairly large. Pre-COVID, we used to have approximately 260 students eating lunch at a time. At this time, with this hybrid model, we're going to have no more than 60, maybe 70 students per period. We're going to have all fifth graders eat together, all sixth graders eat together, seventh and eighth. So they'll each eat with their own grade levels. We'll space those tables out, and we're looking at using student desks, within the cafeteria, so make it a little bit easier to maneuver. Also, we will have taping and signage on the walls and tape on the floors for students who are purchasing snacks or lunch so they know where to stand. And we will have procedures for throwing out trash. Anything to add, Mr. Roberts?
No, the only variation on that theme is the high school will split into two cafeteria settings because we are slightly smaller than the middle school example. We'll have half of the group in the cafeteria. That half will include our seniors because I'd like our seniors to be able to eat outside when the weather allows on the picnic tables that were purchased by previous year senior classes. And then we'll have a second group of students eating in the first gym. This allows us to meet that physical distancing guideline or expectation at the high school. So we'll have to have two different cafeterias, again, our normal cafeteria and the first gym.
Okay, cleaning and disinfecting. This will look the same as at Parkdale. The one thing Mr. Roberts alluded to earlier is we're anticipating if this takes a little extra time between classes, we'll make those adjustments as need be by potentially adding more than 4 minutes between classes. But we're coming up with those plans now and running a lot of tests right now to see how long that truly takes. Movement in the building, masks will be worn at all times by staff and students. We're trying to limit the face-to-face encounters. And this is just pertaining to the hallways again, not within the classrooms at this point. We are making our foot patterns. We're labeling hallways. So there will be tape designating the right side of the hallways where students will walk. So it'll be one-way traffic. And in the middle of the hallway, there will be no traffic to make sure students are apart. And we may even have stairwells, some that are just up, some that are just down. We're really trying to minimize, again, the face-to-face meetings as well as the large group gatherings. Also, while moving the building, I believe this is later, but we are not using lockers this coming year to begin the year. We will be using backpacks that students will be carrying with them throughout the building. Anything to add there, Mr. Roberts?
Just to continue with the movement around the building, as many of you are probably aware, our building is separated into three distinct areas: the A wing, which is athletics, B, which is the center of the building, which is a circle, and C, which is the arts, English, tech, and music. And our B pod, which is the circular, will have one-way movement, and our A and C wings will have out and back movement with students hugging the right side. That'll be taped off with the proper social distancing set in the middle of the hallway. So I think our building works well from a movement standpoint, and that'll be clearly marked for all students and adults.
In the classroom, desks will be 6 feet apart. We will use the 3-sided barriers. The desk surfaces, chairs, and any high-touch areas will be sanitized between the classes. This is where we're going to run some tests this week to see how long that takes. Masks will be worn by students. There are certain times and areas that we will designate for a mask break. For example, if it's a larger classroom and we can have the desks, at least, if not further than 6 feet apart. And if the students are not engaging in conversation with each other, if they're doing a more independent activity, the teacher may then allow the students to take a mask break. So that's something we're working with our teachers. We're going to identify the times because we certainly recognize that it's not easy to wear a mask all day. While it is becoming more of the norm, we understand that it's not comfortable and it's not something that we all enjoy doing, but it is an important thing to follow for the safety guidelines. So we will be allowing the students to take mask breaks, but only when it meets all of our safety guidelines, because obviously that is the first priority. We will have a lot of signage also within the classrooms, and at the middle school, we have a lot of cloth furniture for flexible seating, and we have needed to remove all of those, all the couches that are being used, and any piece of furniture that we are not confident that will be sanitized and disinfected easily has been removed. Okay, technology will be the same as Parkdale. All students will have a Chromebook. They will be transported back and forth to school at all grade levels. We will stress the importance of really making sure that those Chromebooks charge overnight. If they're charged thoroughly overnight, they have at least a 10-hour battery life. So they should be fine during the day. But that is something that we're definitely going to work with our students. And any families, if you need help with any internet access, please do contact the school. Finally, any information or other important information, this is more physical education and music. The New York State Department of Health indicates that we need 12 feet of social distancing whenever students are exercising or exerting, projecting their voice loud, breathing loudly or breathing harder. And we need to have all the students 12 feet apart. So we are following all of these parameters as we build the schedules and as we establish different activities and where these classes will take place. We're working closely with our phys ed teachers and music teachers to come up with ways to address this. To start the year off, students will not be changing for PE classes. That is something we may look at later on in the year, but to start, they will not. And at the middle school, we have made some pretty significant adjustments to our supply list as we have decreased the use of binders, understanding that the students will be carrying their things with them in a backpack for the beginning of the school year.
And those approaches are all consistent with what's going on at the high school.
Okay, and then finally, we have the additional information page, which is the same as what Ms. Lyons shared at Parkdale. Thank you. Let me just figure out how to, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, Mr. Roberts. I am distant from my colleagues and behind a barrier, and I'll be doing a bunch of speaking as I moderate the questions, so I have removed my mask. Those of you that have joined us a little after the beginning, just so you have an understanding what we're going to do, due to the number of questions we got, I kind of grouped them into common questions or common themes, and further group them then by category. So I tried to pick a question or two that kind of represented the mood or feel of that kind of group. For those of you that have questions that are not answered, or I didn't capture your full nuance or specifics of your question by my grouping, we've created an email address called reopen@eak12.org. reopen@eak12.org. That will be monitored during today's presentation, and we'll be able to then not answer the questions via the email, but for me to then ask and clarify that, so that you kind of get a sense of where we're going to go. If your questions aren't answered right away, I'm going to give you kind of the main themes that we're going to talk about and the order we're going to talk about them at. So if you have a question that isn't going to be talked about until later in the presentation, wait for that time. If it's still not answered, that's when you would jump in on that reopen at EAK12. So our themes are first going to be when and how do we reevaluate or pivot models? So big picture questions about moving between models and response to government expectations in the path of the virus. We then had some questions regarding general teaching and learning questions. Those will then be broken down to how will the spring experience for remote learning be different than the fall experience? That was a very popular question. Bunch of questions about special ed and special ed services, those students who need extra accommodations. Questions about what the in-person segment of the hybrid learning will look like from a student standpoint. Questions about what the virtual or remote learning standpoint will look for kids. Bunch of questions that we just categorized as Wednesday. So a lot of questions about what Wednesday is going to look like. And then some miscellaneous questions about the 4-day or the 4 half-day model, and some specifics there. About 2/3 of our questions were about teaching and learning, and about 2/3 of the remaining time will be spent on that. The remaining third to quarter of our questions was on health and safety, building use, logistics, and then odds and ends. So hopefully we're taking that as a sign that while you have very legitimate questions, overall you trust us to keep your kids safe, and that's really our hope and our intent, that you do trust us, because nothing is more important in what we're doing than doing that. And there's just a lot of questions about your children and what they will actually experience returning to school. So again, we're going to ask teaching and learning questions first, followed by health and safety and logistic questions. And then I just have some odds and ends questions that really didn't fit anywhere else. At any time in the process, you can email that reopen@eak12.org, and I will kind of add your question to the queue or where it belongs. So our first questions really kind of talk about the model we chose, and I think that probably toss this to the superintendent. When and how are we going to reevaluate or pivot between models? Is our ultimate goal to fully reopen and get kids back in school? Why not just do a full reopen? Why not just do a hybrid reopen? Why not do a remote reopen? Why not high school and secondary at home and elementary, middle in school? And are there considerations and plans that if we can't staff due to numbers of teachers out of the building, can't find subs, or number of students out of the building, does the district have plans to pivot on those models? So really big picture model questions, how we pivot, how we reevaluate. Mr. Russ?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, the first question is, our goal is to fully reopen. It absolutely is. We, along with the teaching staff, sports staff, Board of Education, all want to move to a full reopen plan. It's just not possible at this time. And so it says the next question is, why not just do it? Because we're not allowed by the documentation we've received from the Department of Health and the CDC and the state. They will not allow us because we must maintain social distancing. We also must require our students and staff to wear masks and other barriers that are stopping us from moving forward with a full return plan at this time. But we're of course open to that. That's what we want. We want the kids back with us, as well as to do the teachers. But we just have to wait to see the progress of the disease. If we see improvement and the governor feels that he can back off, that may allow us to bring students back at some time during the school year. Why not secondary from home and middle and elementary in school? We thought about that model, but the logistics of it just didn't work out. We would need to use almost all of the space for our elementary students, so that would prohibit us from bringing in the high school, middle school students, or at least part of the middle school at all. And we just thought it was absolutely necessary that all students have some time in person, because that connection to their teachers and support staff is so important. So we decided to go with the 2 hybrid models. The reason we selected the K-4 hybrid model, again, we really believe that seeing students 4 days a week is critically important for students of that age. We were able to make it work, even though I'll be honest, it was much more difficult and complicated for us. I know it also poses issues for parents in regard to their childcare, but we really feel it's in the best interest of our students because it allows us a 2.5-hour block 4 times a week that is strictly devoted to their reading and writing and mathematics skills. And so we really feel it's the best model for our students in regard to their learning. And can staff, not enough students. I think if we don't have the staff, we would have to rethink our position. If there's a number of staff members that can't report to work, it's possible that we would need to go on a full remote model. Also, if there's not enough students, I guess our class sizes would just get smaller. So if more and more students decide to go with a total virtual model, it will just decrease our class size, and we would continue to teach as it's been scheduled.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Russ. As we move through the rest of these questions, I know some of them were answered in the PowerPoint. I may just ask it and acknowledge that I believe it was answered in the PowerPoint, just to respect the question asker and the question itself so that you know what your fellow parents and community members are asking. But at any point, if any of the principals or anyone in the room wants to jump in on one of those where I kind of acknowledge that we spoke about it, definitely feel free. So the first kind of group of questions, I'll introduce the group and I'll kind of go over the questions and then we'll double back, is just general teaching and learning questions. There were some questions about why the half day at Parkdale. I believe we've gone over those, but there's some nuance there. Are there cuts to curriculum? Or is there flexibility in our curriculum, our standards, our work expectations, our grading? Will the kids or the adults be switching rooms? Will they be moving as a cohort? Questions about Regents and AP and New York State testing. Will each teacher have their own Google Classroom? I believe in the middle and high they did previously. Parkdale indicated that it will this time moving forward. What initiatives do you have for mental, social, emotional health and safety? I know that's a priority of the superintendents. And then questions about internet bandwidth. So Jess, I know you talked a lot about why the half day at Parkdale. I think there's some follow-up questions there, including what's actually going to be the education focus while during the on-campus time, the true benefit of 4 half days as opposed to 2 full days. Why no Wednesdays? And what about the extra cost of cleaning and busing? And maybe that'll go over to Joanne, our business manager. So Jess, any comments on those?
Yes, sorry, my earbuds are a little behind, so you're still talking in my head. But okay, you're done now. Yeah, so the educational focus, as we touched on, are the ELA and the math, the reading, the writing, really the foundational skills at the K-4 level. We did explore the option of what the middle and high school are doing of the 2 full days, Monday, Tuesday, but we felt for the younger students, not seeing their teacher from a Tuesday all the way to the following Monday just wasn't in their best interest as far as covering content, routines, and procedures. On Wednesday, we're going to use that day for teachers to bring their 2 halves of the classes will never see each other. So they're going to start off their day with some full class Google Meets, some smaller group, mixing up the kids from AM and PM with some activities. The teachers will also use that time to post some videos to the Google Classroom and any extra supplementary assignments. And that's also a day that we're going to use for teachers to receive some professional development in the area, especially around technology.
Thank you. Maybe I'll toss these next little bunch to Mr. Roberts in terms of cuts to the curriculum, specials, extra, flexibility in the curriculum, standards, work expectations, grading, and Regents, New York State exams. I know those are 3-8, but AP, those are kind of our standardized exams. So if you could kind of comment on those, Mr. Roberts.
Thank you so much, Mr. Membretti. Yeah, so as I had mentioned earlier, we are still moving forward with preparation for end of the year Regents exams and May AP exams. There's been no notice from the state nor the AP program that those tests will not be happening. So that is again why one of our major focuses will be in those 4 core areas. We do have a little bit more flexibility in the curriculum in the other areas, and that also was a reason in our decision making that we can streamline the other content areas to fit them into the schedule that we have created for our high school students. So with that said, the expectations, because we're going to have our students with us and also tuning in with us, the expectations will be very similar to what they have been in the past at East Aurora High School, and our students met our expectations, if not exceeded our expectations in the spring. I'm optimistic that they will do the same in the fall. As
Director of Curriculum Instruction, I can chime in that commitment to our full curriculum exists K-12. Some things may look a little different at times due to the methods we use, but we're committed to the full East Aurora experience. There will be a increase of expectations and rigor, and we'll talk about that. But ultimately, there's a pledge for to understand the human side of all of this, and so our administrators and teachers pledge to work with you as individual situations. Questions, I believe we've answered, but again, just to acknowledge the question, will the kids or the adults be switching rooms? Over at Parkdale, it's the adults that will be switching room. At the middle school and high school, it will be the kids that switch rooms. Will each teacher have their own Google Classroom? Yes, each teacher will. Mr. Russ, I know it's been a priority of yours, and we've put a lot of resources into it, including the hiring of a new social worker, second new social worker that'll be joining us. But you want to talk about your initiatives for mental, social, and emotional health and safety of our students and staff?
As important to our students and our staff is their social, emotional, and mental health. This circumstance has put a great deal of pressure on all of us in a variety of ways. It's impacted our family structure as well. And so really committed to providing the necessary support in this regard. We hired a social worker this past school year. We're hiring another one for the upcoming year. We have a team of psychologists, 4 of them throughout the district, as well as counselors in each building. And they work together as a team to provide that support to our teachers and our families, and also to our staff as well. We've been working on a social, emotional, and wellness program over the last 18 months to 24 months, really looking at our students in a more holistic way. And so we're just going to continue to do that and provide that support as necessary. And I really like to thank our counselors who, I think over the 3 months that we are out, March, April, May, and into June, they did a fantastic job of providing resources to our students and their families in regard to small things that you could do each day to improve just how you were feeling, relationship with your family, relationship with friends. It was a very stressful time. People feeling a sense of loss, and they really did an excellent job kind of restoring a lot of our students and families in a time of need. So we're going to continue to focus on that. So if there's anything that comes up that you need assistance with, reach out to your building principal and they'll be happy to help you.
Excellent, thank you. And then a question regarding questions of internet bandwidth and help. I think we noticed last time a lot of parents said they had enough internet and enough technology, and then they realized that their entire family would be needing machines at the same time and sucking up more bandwidth. We do have some ways to partner with you in that. There's no such thing as free internet, but there's ways that we can work with things that will help you out. So if there is a question of each child will have their own individual Chromebook, K through 12. If there's questions of internet and connectivity, work with us. We have some win-win solutions that can make sure that your child can fully participate in a virtual environment. We're going to now pivot from kind of those general teaching and learning questions to one of the more popular questions, and that basically is, how is this fall, the remote part, the virtual part of this fall, going to look different than the spring looked? So maybe Mr. Brown, if you want to kind of lead that with questions of how it will look different. Will work be just marked as complete or graded? There was some mention of we will start streaming as capabilities allow. What does that mean? Questions about streamlining our expectations, the posting of assignments and due dates in PowerSchool, parent access to PowerSchool, professional development for parents, so that there are some of these platforms that they've never used in their work environment, but now need to know how to navigate to help their children be successful. Will there be increased accountability and attendance since the spring experience? So Mr. Brown, if you want to kind of lead that charge, and then we'll just bounce it around to some of the other folks.
Sure. Simplest answer is yes, it will look different. And now, speaking clearly from the middle school perspective, however, a lot of similarities, especially with the high school and Parkdale. At the middle school, if you had a child at the middle school last year, you know that we went to a standard met and standard not met rubric. We did not grade per se for the second half of the third and the entire fourth quarter, with the exception of the 2 Regents classes that we have in algebra and earth science. Those 2 classes, we followed the high school model. We recognize that leading into the fall, that needs to change. We will have grading procedures in place. We're working with our teacher teams right now. We've begun that work to identify exactly what will that look like in the core areas versus the electives or rotations. So those are there's going to be information provided to you that will answer any of your specific questions in grading. But the big question is, yes, there will be grades. Also, as capabilities allow, we are looking at increasing the use of the technology. And what I mean by that is the district has purchased cameras and microphones for teachers to use. So as Mr. Roberts alluded to earlier, we anticipate that our students at the middle school and high school will sign in for their core classes when they're working remotely. They will have synchronous learning opportunities, which means they will potentially be live streamed into the classroom through a Google Meet, where they can watch the lesson, they can see the smartboard, they can interact with the teacher while the teacher is working with students who are there. These are all capabilities that the district has purchased. They're not on site yet. So as our capabilities grow, as we provide professional development for teachers, as they feel comfortable, and as we develop these capabilities, you will see an increase in the use of those things. Speaking of the professional development, yes, we recognize that you, parents, you're going to need some opportunities for professional development. Our technology department is putting that together, where they will have a series of, whether they're videos or opportunities for you to ask questions. We're also working with the Google Classroom to set it up where parents will have information that will automatically come to them from their child's Google Classrooms, just to help you as parents be able to navigate through what work is due and what has your child done. So we're definitely looking at increasing all of those things. And then earlier we did mention how there will be attendance taken in the remote learning. So that is something through the Google Classroom and Power School that we are working on as well. And I think the last part of that question was what we've tried to do. Last year in the spring, we had over 600 programs that were used in the district. And these were programs, we recognized that teachers, in the flip of a switch, they had to change their teaching pedagogy and go to remote teaching and remote instruction, which is something that not many were comfortable with. So we found a lot of different programs out there, and they did an incredible job in finding resources that would help them to provide, as engaging material as possible. We heard that there was just too much for many students, too many avenues, too many programs. So we took that list of 600 and we've dwindled it down to about 70. Which is a much more reasonable number. And these are a lot of the things that we know the teachers really need, and we believe the students need. And we also believe that it'll be a little bit more more streamlined for you as parents and you as families to help you through that process. But for a vast majority of the technology and the remote learning experience will take place through the Google Suite and the Google Classroom, which we have found to be extremely effective. Believe that answers most of the bullets that you asked about.
Good job, Mr. Brown. And I would indicate of the 70, which still seems like a somewhat high number, many of those are very specific programs. So either a specific tech or CAD program, our art academy, library databases, things like that. So you're going to notice a significant streamlining of process. At the same time, one of the other things we noticed was, teachers who have been trained and practiced their entire life in in-person instruction were thrown into hybrid and remote learning. And I think they did a really good job. Based on the circumstances, I don't think I'd speak for any of them in saying that they thought it was enough and that they didn't want to learn more. So with the leadership of the superintendent, we've partnered with the College of Education at St. John Fisher College, who is teaming up with us to provide our teachers with ongoing best practices in hybrid, remote, virtual learning as it goes to content, as it goes to assignments, assessments, structure, engagement, all that. So our teachers are going to be not only only streamlined in their technology, but streamlined in their teaching methodologies, especially as it comes to the remote learning. So that's another key piece of what's going to look different. I will say, you know, on our end of things, these questions kind of come from a full spectrum. We had many parents saying what happened in the spring was not enough and we need more. I would say, and the principals may kind of nod and agree, that we had just as many parents saying, whoa, this is way too much. Don't you understand what's going on? Our family can't meet these standards and expectations. So again, our job is to teach the entire community and understanding that every family in this pandemic is in a different spot. So our job is following the government's lead in terms of increasing rigor and increasing expectation, but also understanding for every parent that said it was too much, there was a parent that said it wasn't enough, and vice versa as well. I know, Ms. Lyons, I think you tried to catch my attention. You have something to say?
First of all, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I just wanted to touch on what Mr. Brown was saying. It will look different at Parkdale also. We do plan on completing the report cards in their entirety as they were prior to March 13th with the progress that the students are making towards mastering the standards for ELA and math. If you're familiar with our report cards, the majority of it is for ELA and math and how they're progressing towards the standards. So we do plan on grading work how we have in the past and providing feedback, and that seeing the students 4 of the 5 days does help with that. We will also be taking attendance just as the middle school and high school will be. The 4 days in school, we'll take attendance as if they were there. And then on the Wednesdays, we will be taking attendance via those classroom Google Meets I talked about in the morning, and making accommodations for those families whose child cannot attend those Google Meets. We'll be taking attendance in some other way on those Wednesdays.
One question that did come in that kind of, I'll jump ahead because it was something that we've covered and kept going, regarding the social emotional learning, tier 1 intervention strategies, things of that nature. And it's going to segue a little bit into what Jerome was saying. From the counseling standpoint, I have worked with the counselors, the psychologists, the social workers on making sure that we have appropriate plans and interventions in place. We had a series of meetings. Today, the entire counseling team got together to actually come up with our tiered interventions and plans. I've been in these meetings all day, so I have not seen that document yet, but those pieces of what sort of interventions and plans we're going to have for the social been a long day, social, emotional, mental piece of this, those are in the works, and those will be made public shortly, just as soon as I can review that document. Speaking of interventions and added support, I'm going to say there was a number of questions. I'm going to toss them to Mr. Plakowitz over here to my left regarding special education. Basically, how will special ed services work in this hybrid model, whether it's an IEP, a 504, OT, PT, speech, additional accommodations such as extended time applications. Special ed students be offered additional time or opportunity. What about other interventions, things that these students in particular need?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Manberry. Students will, whether they're in person in the classroom or learning at home synchronously with the class, they will have full classroom accommodations and special education support as dictated by their individual education plan. If students that are learning synchronously have follow-up questions or need additional support, that'll be arranged through special education teachers as case managers, working through their office hours and appointments to be able to assist those students better. In addition to that, we're really trying to stay away from having additional related services, especially pull-out services of OT, PT, speech, and counseling outside of the academic day or academic times. And for that, we're looking at a variety of models that include students coming in the opposite half of the day that they may be in school at Parkdale, K to 4, or in the secondary level, working on opposite days, coming in and receiving additional services that they need for that support. We also have a floating day of Wednesday where it may allow teachers to have freed up schedules and related service providers to be able to service kids during those time periods as well. As soon as the teachers get back and we see exactly the population we're working with in each of the buildings at each of the grade levels, we'll really troubleshoot a schedule to be able to backfill all those open areas that may exist. In addition to that, I know some related service providers, when I met with them last week, talked about doing some synchronous activities, especially group sessions, in a live type of Google environment for those things to happen. So as far as academic intervention services, each of the buildings will be providing those consistently as they have in the past, and whether they're pushing into classrooms, those academic areas, or again, looking to backfill in open areas of the student schedules on the opposite times that the students are responsible for being in their academic areas.
All right. Thank you, Jerome. All right, we're now going to shift into kind of the day-to-day experience of children. We're going to first talk about the in-person experience that they would have when they're in the building. We're then going to talk about the virtual or remote part, so the days that they will not be here learning with us, but will be at home learning. And then there's a subsection of that that will talk about the kids who choose to go all virtual. So those are the kids who will never come into the building. And then there's a separate subsection of that we're just calling Wednesday, and we'll get to the specifics of Wednesday. So first, we're going to talk about the in-person experience of children in the building. Questions that came in along that topic are going to be: how many kids are going to be in a room at a time? What is the max class size? Questions about cleaning desks: who's responsible and how often will they be cleaned? Desk spacing. How do we keep the teachers away from kids in terms of normal teaching is, going around the room, helping kids with things like that. Questions about the opening of windows as the temperature and seasons allow. Will there be barriers in classrooms? What about the hallway, or are there tape markings? What special considerations are made for large spaces or classes, such as chorus, band, gym, and cafeteria? I know some of that was covered in the PowerPoint, but if there's anything to add. Will there be a prioritization or a push towards outdoor learning during the nicer weather, either outside, or if we could get some pop-up tents, those tent thingies, and questions about things like the cafeteria. What's that experience going to be like? Will kids have opportunity to use phones or things like that if they're kind of all sitting in rows facing the same direction? So I don't know, maybe Mr. Brown, you want to start on the in-person experience, some of those, and then we'll bump to Mr. Roberts, and then Ms. Lyons can jump in.
Sure. Can you hear me? Okay, sorry. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how many students in a room at a time? So our architects have actually helped us and worked very hard with our buildings and grounds crew to identify the best way to lay out each classroom, to make sure that we have the social distance, but also to have as many students as we can. Most of the classrooms at the middle school are in that 11 to 14 student range. So, we're working right now to kind of go through and see what those classrooms are going to look like. Is there a potential where if maybe for one class we have 15 students and that class only holds 13 desks, will we have to relocate that class to a larger space? Certainly, that's possible. So those are a lot of the things that we're working on now. What we're trying to do is finalize our number of the students who are going to stay home. Again, we ask that we have that information by the end of the week at the middle school and high school. And then as we finish our students' schedules, we'll be identifying all of those locations, throughout the building and make sure that we're able to ensure the social distancing. The teachers also will have a plexiglass has been placed in many of the rooms. It will be in all of the rooms by the time everyone's here. That's a barrier between them, and then the students will have their barriers at their desks. And as we talked about earlier, the students will be using masks, but as time allows, as time allows, as all these safety measures are in place, as long as they're all in place, there may be times where the students can take those mask breaks. That will depend on the situation within the classroom. The large spaces, the band, the chorus, those are all things that we're working on right now to really, space out the students 12 feet apart. We may have to do smaller groups. So these are all the things that we're working with the music teachers and phys ed teachers. Outdoor instruction is something that I know at Parkdale and the high school, I believe it's been done a little bit more because they have more of the space to allow it. At the middle school, we do have some benches out back and an outdoor instructional space. So we will allow teachers the opportunity to go out there. We always have. Some do take advantage of it and always have. So we will allow teachers to bring their classes outside when weather permits and as they feel that it's an important thing to do so. I know the phone during lunch question came up for the middle school. A lot of those procedural things, we are going to be working on that plan. So that's something that I've added to the list as a point of discussion and something that we will certainly take into consideration. And I believe that's it from the middle school perspective. I don't know if I covered it for the district or not.
Any other things about the in-person experience, either at the high school or Parkdale, or yeah, Jess?
Yeah, just a couple of small differences. Because the way our rooms are shaped in the row of cubbies, we can only fit about 11 or 12 students in a room 6 feet apart at any given time. Our teachers are working on ways to reconfigure their spaces. If you've ever been in one of your elementary kids' classrooms, the teachers usually have a couple different spaces they work at. So they're working on putting all of that space in one area, and that's where the plexiglass barrier will go. We're also exploring opening windows, going outside. We have a lot of green space at Parkdale and a lot of big trees for shade on the hot days. So we will be taking out students outside whenever possible. And I think that's the only differences for Parkdale.
And from the high school perspective, very, very similar to the middle school. Our rooms vary in size, so the capacity of each room is going to vary as well. But we're working through that. Our outdoor space, we do have an outdoor classroom, which was dedicated by a senior class a few years ago. So we're fortunate to have that. I know a lot of teachers are coming up with plans to take their classes outside, and I'm fully supporting that. And I'm not sure if the phones during lunch was something that was specific to the high school or the middle school, but at the high school, phones have been and will continue to be allowed during the lunchtime.
A lot of the in-person questions, Mr. Russ, had to do with not so much the teaching and the instruction. I think hopefully our parents trust us, and the lack of questions in that area point to that. But just again about the safety procedures and protocols. And I know you've mentioned numerous times kind of this layers of safety approach. If you could just explain that a little bit.
Sure. Our safety procedures and protocols are in compliance with CDC and Department of Health guidance. When we had a meeting with Dr. Gail Bernstein last week, Monday, she explained that the more precautions you take, basically the better it will be. So therefore, we've decided to maintain the 6 feet social distancing, wearing of masks, and also the use of barriers within the classroom and in the cafeterias. And we will be also being in compliance with the cleaning schedules, using products, again, that were recommended to us that are indicated for killing of the disease. And so that process will be put in place in all areas, in our classrooms, in the cafeterias, restrooms, common areas, offices, all of those types of spaces. So we're doing everything we possibly can to create an environment that is as safe as possible, but also allows our teachers to continue to instruct and engage with their students in a meaningful way.
Excellent. Thank you. We're now going to shift from the in-person experience to the virtual experience. And again, that's going to be broken up into 3 categories. The first is the virtual experience for those students participating in the true hybrid model. So they're here 2 days or 4 half days, and then they're home, the flip of that. What will that look like? How will that look the same or different for the children that whose parents choose them to remain fully virtual? And that's when we're still in hybrid. So that's different than if the entire district went remote. And then a standalone category is just going to be Wednesday, because that kind of stands as a different day district-wide. So the questions for virtual and remote, basically what's going to be our main teaching and learning platform. I think Mr. Brown indicated it, but it will be the Google Suite for Education, and we actually upgraded it to the Enterprise Edition, so we have all the bells and whistles, and you'll see a noticeably enhanced experience there. For the principals, questions about instruction, interaction, expectations during the virtual days. When and how can students go for work? Will there be a regular schedule that kids need to sign in at regular times? Will there be some flexibilities built in for when the students can't sign in at those times? A really good question that just came in about what's going to be the expectations for parents or caregivers or daycare centers in helping facilitate that. How much is going to be led by what's happening on the screen, and how much of that is going to need to be the person next to the child, especially at the younger ages? Will in-person students be on the web stream to kids at home? The answer to that is no. The cameras will be set up to primarily focus solely on the teacher and the teaching space. Obviously, there may be incidental times, but it's truly to capture the education that's happening by the teacher. It's not kind of a bird's eye view of the whole camera or a roving camera that kind of fans the stands like in sporting events. It's designed to be on the teacher. How long will my kids be sitting in front of a screen? How much work can I expect for them each day? A number of very specific questions about remote at kindergarten, screen time and what that's going to look like. The balance between synchronous, which means happening live as the kids watch it, and asynchronous, which means recorded and watched at a later date or time. Are there going to be consequences if there's a legitimate reason that you cannot sign in for a synchronous time, including attendance being taken? What happens if your internet goes down or you get kicked out? Do you suddenly get marked as absent? And will lessons be recorded and posted online? So, Mr. Roberts, if you could kind of take the first glance at all of those, and then we'll then share the wealth with your colleagues.
Sure, Mr. Mayor Brady, could you just repeat all those first? That was a joke.
They're on the sheet in front of you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Brady. So the easy answer is for the core areas. Our students obviously will use the blue group as an example. They'll be in person on Monday, Tuesday, and they will be logging in during their class time on Thursday and Friday and viewing from home. In our electives or our non-core for this year, they'll be in person on Monday, Tuesday. During that time, our students will set the stage for the learning and practice that the students will be performing the rest of the week. And so they won't be logging in for an art class. Using the blue group as an example, they won't be logging in for an art class on Thursday and Friday, but the teacher will provide them with the materials and the work that they can complete that at home. I can use Mr. Kegler as an example. In his drawing class, he has a full video produced by him on drawing and painting. And he'll be able to give that professionally done by him as a Roycroft artisan. He'll be able to provide video for students to refer to when they're doing that at home on Thursday and Friday. So that flexibility of the electives and non-core area, they might be doing online assignments. They might be completing group work that's been assigned by the teacher, completing projects, watching videos. And there's flexibility there. They can complete that anytime on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday for the blue group as an example, and then flip-flop that for the red group. Let me just see what else Mr. Membretti said here. The students do need to log in, and they will be marked absent if they're not logged in, and the as Mr. Membretti referenced, the new Google Suite takes attendance and monitors a student's engagement, meaning are they logged in and are they logged in for the entire time? So we'll be monitoring that. Again, for the amount of time a student's going to be expected to be in front of the computer, that was a major factor in our decision making. So for students that are not in session and are at home on their virtual days, they'll have 4 40-minute periods in which they'll have to be logged in. We were conscious of overwhelming students. We didn't want them to sit in front of a computer from 7:40 in the morning to 2:45 in the afternoon. It wasn't realistic. It was going to burn them out. So we have this model that we think is going to be respectful of that for our students. And Mr. Mambretti, was there anything else that you want me specifically to address?
No, I think we will circle back to some of these. There's a couple of things I just want to clarify because it's one of the questions I get asked a lot. Those students participating in the virtual learning, it's not like watching YouTube, or as those of you out there in TV land are doing. It's more like us here in the room are doing. It's live, it's interactive, so it's run as a full Google Classroom where the teacher can see the screen of the kids who are watching at home, and those kids can ask questions, virtually raise their hand. There'll be a chat box, things like that. So it's not watching 4 40-minute versions or 5 40-minute versions of educational TV, but it would be more of an experience where there's that interaction. The teacher sees the 12 kids in front of them, the 12 kids on the screen, but all 24 kids in this example are able to participate in real time.
Brady, if you don't mind, if I can jump in there, just for students and families who have selected at the high school for a complete virtual experience. Again, they can log in for those core classes, but there will be no logging in for your art class, your music class, business class, technology class. Those will all be online assignments, project-based, and video-supported instruction.
And I'd just like to add, everything that Mr. Roberts shared about the high school is fairly consistent with the middle school. There just may be some expectations that are a little bit different. For example, we do have the 5 core classes. There may be some lessons where the students are, synchronous learning where they have to stay on for the full 40 minutes. There will be certain lessons like that, but we also are talking about designing some lessons where they're just engaged for that synchronous learning for like a 10 or 15-minute mini lesson, which is the lesson of the day. And then the other times could be some sort of group work or independent work. So they might not actually be logged on for the entire 40-minute period. But these are the type of things that we're working, our teachers are working really hard as they receive the professional development over the next few weeks to really develop these lessons that will engage the students the best we can under all of the circumstances at hand.
Ms. Lyons, a lot of questions about virtual learning at an elementary, even at kindergarten level. Can you, and there's questions about young children and screen time, things like that. Can you talk to us a little bit about virtual learning at the elementary level?
Yes, it will not look like the middle and high school. So when I say virtual learning, I'm referring to the half AM or the half PM when the students are not in session. And when they're not in session for those half days, there will be a variety of activities they can complete, and we will have flexibility. So if you do refer to those sample hybrid schedules I put up for each grade level, that'll give you an idea. We are giving out a regular schedule, and with that regular schedule will come the synchronous specials. It will come the synchronous AIS, ELA, and math classes. But there will also be flexibilities in that those lessons for specials and support will also be recorded. So students who are in daycares and childcare where they cannot access a Chromebook will be able to complete those at a different time than those scheduled times. But if students are available those scheduled times, so they will be able to experience synchronous lessons. How long in front of a screen, how much work? In addition to those synchronous lessons by specials and AIS, there are chunks of time set aside for supplementary and reinforcement activities from the classroom teacher. That will be a combination of pieces of paper, paper activities, and Google Classroom activities. I would say that's going to vary from a kindergartner up to a 4th grader. So the how much work will a kindergartner be given to complete on the virtual half of the day? Not as much as a 4th grader. Will a kindergartner have more paper activities to complete than a 4th grader? Yes. And then up through the continuum, those percentages will begin to flip-flop. There will be a combination from kindergarten all the way up to 4th grade. They do not have to be logged in the entire time on their opposite of their in-person schedule. Like I said, there will be times for them to log in to experience the synchronous specials and AIS. but the other activities would be a combination of Google Classroom and paper. They will not be penalized for not being able to sign in and experience those synchronous lessons. Like I said, we're going to have opportunities for students to do those things outside of those exact time schedules on the sample schedules. I think that's it.
One question that,
Thank you. I would just like to add to what each of the three principals said in regards to virtual or remote learning. Exclusively, students will still be assigned a case manager if they are receiving special education services, and arrangements will be made either through teacher office hours and or direct contact with the related service people, OT, PT, speech, or counseling to work out accommodations in those areas.
We did have a question that came in regarding what the barriers that we're sitting behind look like, so that's why I put my mask back on so I can lift it. It's completely clear, so I don't know if this is going to work or not, but it's a three-sided barrier that, I don't know if that works for you, that gets Velcroed to the desk in front of the child. Velcro, we'll be able to move that around. Jerome, you got to turn off your mic. Hopefully that worked for you, because I didn't know how I was going to show that. Will there be parent professional development on the platforms that their children, especially the Google? Yes, that is part of our plan to get you that as before school or as school begins, to make sure that you feel fully supported in that. And of course, we will work, while we're going to set standards, we will work with folks individually on specific things of virtual and remote. Now we're going to talk about if the district remains in a full hybrid model, but parents don't want their children to come in to the building. So do you have the option to pick an all virtual model? Yes, you do have that option to pick it by semester. What is the deadline to decide? That's a little bit of a chicken and egg question, and I'm going to come back to that one. Can you choose in person, and then if for whatever reason it's not working for you, your family, your child, choose to then go remote? That is a possibility. We'd ask you to reach out to your child's principal to talk about that transition, but that is something that is allowed for you to opt out then again until the next semester break. When can you switch back in? The end of the first semester, which I believe is Friday, January 29th, if my memory holds up. It's whatever that last Friday in January is. And then some questions about that. And again, we're going to come back to that deadline to decide. I think a lot of the questions we're getting are parents are saying, and rightfully so, they're trying to help us by telling us what they want. But until we tell them what it's going to look like, they don't know what we want. But until we know how many kids we are here, we don't know what it's going to look like. And they acknowledge there's a chicken and an egg thing. So for those parents that are on the fence about returning or virtual, principals, what's your advice to them? And then we'll talk a little bit more about what that full remote experience will look like.
Sorry about that. I mean, my advice would obviously be, you know your child best, and do what's, most comfortable for you. I know most of us in this room are parents as well, and we all have these, decisions to make what's best for our family, and knowing the circumstances of your family. I guess, from our perspective, we'd like to know the students will definitely be only staying virtual or not coming in person learning, hopefully by this Friday at the latest. And the reason for that is that will really help us in balancing our classes. That will help us be able to determine, if we can have all of our classes without moving to larger locations, because that might be if I have 4 classes second period that need a new location. What if I don't have 4 locations and I'm gonna have to rebalance everything? So this definitely does have an impact, just knowing the numbers. So we just ask that you let us know by the end of the week. That would be something that's definitely appreciated. And I would just say that, I've spoken with several parents over the past few days. So if you have questions or anything, even after these meetings are complete, please just reach out to us. We're here to help you. And we're here to just kind of let you know more specifically if you have a circumstance that pertains just to you.
And some of that is, reach out to your principal if you're on the fence. Let them know at least which way you're leaning, understanding it's not a final answer, but it truly is a chicken and an egg experience. Once we know how many kids we have, we can build our plan. Once you see the plan, you can decide if you're going to send your kid, and the clock is ticking. But we know there's issues there. I believe there was a Parkdale survey that went out, and that parents are encouraged to call the middle school or high school with their at least their initial thoughts, so that folks know.
Can I just make one additional? I'm sorry, Mr. Member. I meant to say, the blue group and red group. The reason why we split them up with that alphabet is because it makes it very equitable or equal numbers, I should say. I believe we have like 6 more students on one half of the alphabet that we picked as opposed to the other. So we understand, students who are twins, we're trying our absolute best to give them identical schedules. So they're exposed to fewer, cohorts of students, so they have the same experience throughout the day. We understand a few parents have reached out with, childcare, or reasons that they want to be, a student who would be scheduled in the blue group to be scheduled in the red group. Please understand that we want to help you. We're making lists and we're working through them. And once we have our numbers, we'll certainly do everything we can, but understand that it's not an easy task. It's very difficult to manage some of these numbers and move students from group to group. So I just want to be very upfront that that's not always going to be possible if it's something that you desire. However, especially for childcare reasons, once we have all of these numbers figured out, if the numbers will allow it, we will then look to consider that, especially at the middle school level, at the 5th and 6th grade, because we do understand that they're still elementary students. So please know that if you reach out to us, we're trying our absolute best, but it's not an easy thing to manage through.
And then questions about those students who are going to remain completely virtual. So what happens to remote specials, classes that are hands-on or project-based, such as art or PE? What does the all virtual model during hybrid learning, what does it look like? What can I expect? Will all virtual children be assigned a teacher and a cohort? Will they be blended with in-person peers, or will they be isolated as all the remote kids with a remote teacher? Will they have equal opportunities as their in-person peers or equal experiences? Will there be a chance for them to pick up Chromebooks, supplies, other library materials, a chance for them to meet their teachers in some way, shape, or form? So questions about the all virtual part of remote.
Yes, so as you had said, it's a chicken and egg. For the K-4 level, if you could take your best guess at indicating what you're leaning towards on the survey, but you can shoot me an email or give me a call if you are on the fence, kind of waiting to see what that will look like. Basically, at the K-4 level, if we get enough students or families who do choose that, the magic number is right around 12, we will be able to dedicate a teacher at that particular grade level to work with those students in a cohort together in an afternoon or a morning session for their academics. If we cannot achieve that number, then the students will be still in a classroom in their grade level, and they will be joining their class via a Google Meet live stream and videos from their teacher. Families who do pick all virtual will at all grade levels be able to pick up a Chromebook and any other supplies that they do need to work at home.
So basically, the all virtual students, it would be the equivalent as if they're moving between red group and blue group. They would just experience what the at-home group has experienced. In terms of equal opportunities, yes. In terms of equal experiences, obviously there's certain things that can only happen in the classroom, but our goal is to give them as full an education as possible. They would just join their synchronous classes virtually 4 days a week as opposed to 2 days a week, and 5 days a week with Wednesday, and we'll get to that in a minute, and that they would participate in those activities as if they would just remain at home. But let's talk about Wednesday. That's the big question. What's Wednesday going to look like? There's not a lot of sub-questions to this because the question was basically, what's going on with Wednesday? So who wants to jump in with what Wednesday will look like for kids, what Wednesday will look like for teachers? Mr. Roberts?
Thank you, Mr. Manbretti. The first thing, and this is going to be probably you'll want to hear from all buildings, but I can talk from a high school perspective and a middle school perspective initially. We'll be transitioning from our blue group to our red group on Wednesday. And so that's going to give us the opportunity to do a deep cleaning between the two groups, and that's in all areas, classrooms, common areas. So again, we're talking about the safety of our students and our teachers, that they will offer that opportunity. At the high school level, the Wednesday will offer the opportunity for our teachers to have scheduled office hours that will be able to assist students with one-on-one interaction, with questions and support to our students that would traditionally be found in an activity period time, but due to the fact that we will not have activity period, office hours on Wednesday are going to be very, very important. Also, individual student supports that our students would receive on a daily basis can be shifted to Wednesday in order to fulfill any needs that our students have. Our counseling center is going to be very busy on Wednesday. We will perform lots of our individual counseling, group counseling, and also at the high school, it's college and career preparation and support will be done during this time, again, because we're trying to limit the travel and interactions in person. So most of this will take place during our Wednesday time period. On the teacher side, we're going to have all of our meetings during this time because we will not have time during the traditional activity period to have those meetings. And we'll be providing our teachers with ongoing professional development and planning time. So Wednesdays are going to be a busy day to fill the gaps that are caused by the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday schedule and time restrictions that we have due to the increased safety protocols that we have in place.
Mr. Brown, Ms. Lyons, is that what Wednesdays are going to look like in your buildings as well?
Yeah, I would echo what Mr. Roberts said, with the exception, obviously, of the college prep and that whole piece. Other than that, it would look extremely similar at the middle school level.
And if you take a look at the hybrid samples for a Wednesday, there's at the very end of the document. It will look different than Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday for students, but it will look the same for all grade levels. We're going to start off with some sort of full class Google Meet and small group Google Meet, and then we'll continue on with some structured schedule for special support services, AIS, and then there'll be some videos that teachers will put up on Wednesdays and any work that was sent home on Tuesdays. And then as time goes on, we do hope to bring in some students with special needs to be able to receive in-person services on Wednesdays.
A couple more questions on the 4-day, half-day model and the virtual learning piece. We're going to move more into, up until now, we've tried to describe an experience to you. We're now going to get into some questions that are equally important, but are a little more, here's the answer. So it's going to pick up clip just a little bit. And there are some questions that have come in on the email line. Again, questions that you've not heard answered yet, you can email to reopen@eak12.org. But we still have our whole health and safety, building use, and odds and ends section. Before we move ahead on that, just educationally, a question regarding screen time. Do students need to bring Chromebooks on the days that they're at school, and why?
We are asking that they bring the Chromebooks. The teachers will be spending parts of the days helping the students, teaching them how to navigate their Google Classroom, how to find their assignments, where they'll be posted there when they are home on Wednesdays or the opposite half of the day. So we'll be doing some professional development for the students on those days, and they do have their Chromebooks at school.
I think one of the other things is to cut down as much as we're very aware of screen time, to cut down on the transmission of papers being handed out, turned in, brought home, brought back. Again, the online turning in of instructions, it's not the end all be all, and we're very conscious of the balance. But students being able to transmit everything that way. Other thoughts, Bill or Matt, on that topic, or just it's a new tool of instruction?
Yeah, just our teachers over the last year really have made a transition into using Chromebooks in the classroom. They certainly do not use them all the time in the classroom or every day in the classroom, but they are a valuable tool that the teachers definitely use for instruction.
Great. Mr. Roberts, a question just about foreign language at the high school. Is that going to be synchronous, asynchronous, project-based? Questions about the foreign language curriculum.
So foreign language obviously be in person twice a week, and then on the other days, again, looking at online assignments and group work and projects, and maybe videos to support that instruction. I think that again, as I said earlier, we're very sensitive to the amount of screen time that our students are going to have sitting in front of the computer all day and have to draw the line somewhere. And with foreign language not having a Regents exam, the only exception to that would be our AP Spanish students would be required to log in and be a part of that class, because we do have an AP Spanish exam to prepare for. But we do have that flexibility with the other languages and the lack of a Regents exam or an AP exam. So they will not be tuning in on the days that they're not in the building. But I have great confidence that our teachers are going to come up with creative ways to instruct and maintain our level of engagement of those students. And those students will have the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, in order to fulfill the requirements that the teacher set forth.
Just a question about privacy and the screening. I know what we're going to do is controlled by the Google Classroom, so it's not out there on the internet per se as a traditional YouTube video. Questions that obviously, as I mentioned, the camera will be focused primarily on the teacher and the learning space, but questions about children's voices or teachers calling on kids getting answers wrong, potential discipline, and other situations, either for privacy reasons or for very sensitive family situations, that parents are very concerned about that. So I know we're going to have some PD for our teachers regarding the appropriate use of and awareness that a camera's in the classroom. What would you say to a parent that for very legitimate reasons needs to make sure that their child's name, face, voice, likeness is not portrayed in an online setting, or for their personal reason, or go ahead.
And I think, at least from the high school perspective, I think it would be the same at the middle school and at Parkdale, is we would just ask the parents to reach out to us as we do with pictures in our pre-COVID environment. Parents who don't want their student to be photographed or that photo to be published publicly, it would be the exact same. We would just ask for you to reach out to us, and we can make those accommodations. So the important thing is just letting us know and letting us know ahead of time. Although Mr. Mambretti is exactly right. The cameras are going to be located to have the teacher, and at the high school level, the smart board within view, and that is it. And as he said, we'll go through training with our teachers to make sure that happens. But again, parents, just reach out to us and we can accommodate those requests.
Some more, and I would assume that's the same at both other levels, the respecting of privacy and sensitive situations. Great. Just again, now we're going to kind of get into some more nutsy boltsy type questions. The possibility of kids switching from red to blue or AM to PM. I know the answer is different at the elementary than it is at the higher level. So Jess, do you want to just quickly respond to that?
Yes, on the survey I sent out last week, that's due tomorrow, you can indicate if you prefer your child attends the opposite session than their last name would have assigned them to. And you just have to state why, childcare reasons, transportation reasons. And once we are able to compile those results and monitor the students that are transferring out of Parkdale or choosing homeschool, We will be able to let you know if we can accommodate your request for a switch in AM or PM.
And if I could just jump in, similar to the middle school, that request is going to be very, very difficult for the high school to accommodate. We're dividing these classes so they are equal. And as soon as we have students switching groups, it will prevent us from having equal groups in session in the green and the red group. And quite possibly, if one group becomes too large or one class becomes too large because of those switches, will prevent them from meeting in the classroom that the teacher traditionally works in. And that ripple effect, although not necessarily visible from the outside, that ripple effect is quite extreme. So although I will listen to those requests, it'll be very, very difficult to accommodate those.
And same at the middle school. Questions about the blue-red schedule or the half-day schedule be a regular rotation, or will there be changes? In short, can we plan for it? What about weeks with holidays? My understanding is for the foreseeable future, one group is Monday, Tuesday, the second group is Thursday, Friday, and definitely plan on that, at least for the time being. No questions there. Is there a recognition that due to this model, some kids will just never see each other? And yes, that is something we weighed heavily. And again, part of our model is to cut down on that contact. It is unfortunate that certain kids will never see some kids that they're very close to. It's the models within the constraints that we're working on. Maybe a question actually a series of questions for Mr. Russ to kind of quickly address. If enough parents opt out, will there be the option for some folks to opt in for 4-day learning? What about help with daycare, either resource help or financial help? Are you aware of and have you considered the economic burden you're placing on parents using this model? Those type of questions. Mr. Russ, I know Mr. Plakowitz, you were working on childcare as well.
Sure. Yes. If enough students opt out, can others opt in? I just don't see that as being possible. There are a number of people that would prefer to go to school more days per week. How we would select that, we just really have no idea. So we don't anticipate that happening, not only for that reason, but just for the logistics of the room setup. There's just a lot of steps. It's really quite a complicated process to make it work. So we really don't see that as a possibility. The same thing with daycare. We have been working with the Boys and Girls Club, Duck Duck Goose, and the Community Nursery, all which offer childcare. They've had slots available. I believe they may be filled. We're checking with them to see if they are able to offer additional openings. So we'll be sharing that with parents over the next couple of days. Resources, financial. The district is not in a position to provide any financial resources for childcare, and we do recognize that this isn't an economic burden to some families, but under the current circumstances, we really don't have many options in order to bring students back under the conditions set by the Department of Health and the CDC. We're not able to bring all of our students back on a full-time basis. So the two models that we've selected, the one for Parkdale and the one for the middle and high school, we believe are the best models for our students in regard to their learning and their overall development.
Great. There was questions about will there be some sort of video or day in the life that kids can begin orienting to the school? And I know that there's talks about orientation, planning videos. We'll talk about those opportunities for orientation, safety protocols, comfort building, chances to meet with counselors in our next section. So that brings us to the end of our pretty much the teaching experience. So if you had a question about teaching and learning you didn't hear, now's the time to shoot that over to reopen at eak12.org. We're now going to move into health and safety and building use and logistics. Again, we're not meaning to give that short shrift. There were less questions about that than what your kid's going to experience. And a lot of these are going to be just kind of yes or no questions. We've gone over a bunch of them. So in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of ask and answer, but I'm going to encourage those that have other answers to jump in and flesh this out if it means specific. And Mr. Leibrock, I'm going to call on you for a specific part of this. But actually, why don't we start with mask guidelines? Will the kids be required to wear a mask all day. What exactly do we mean by mask breaks? Who's going to provide masks? And what are options for not wearing masks? I know, Mr. Brown, you answered this last time. Would you mind answering it again?
Sure. Yes, students are required to wear masks all day. And as Mr. Russ said, these are the guidelines that we have to follow. We just have to follow certain ones, and this is one of them. And we do expect that the students wear them all day, with the exception of these mask breaks. And like I stated earlier, the mask breaks are going to take place in a time where students are 6 feet apart, where they do have barriers, and they're not engaging in any face-to-face speaking. Then the teachers, if they meet all of these requirements, will have the opportunity to then allow mask breaks within the classroom. Because certainly we understand that it's not comfortable. But, one of the things that we're really dedicated to doing is making sure that this is the safest place possible for all students, but not only for the students, but for the faculty, for the staff, for the people in this room. We all have kids and parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles, and we're just here to make sure that the students experience the best possible day they can experience while they're here. We're going to take care of them. We're going to support them. We're going to try our best to engage them and give them everything that they deserve. But first and foremost will always be the safety. We have added masks onto supply lists. So we are asking that parents provide those. With that being said, I know the district has ordered hundreds, if not thousands, of masks that are on hand, and we will definitely have some available in each of the main offices and other locations. So if a student loses one, or one becomes dirty, or it breaks, I know the ear things pop off sometimes. We will certainly provide a student that doesn't have one with a mask, so that will not be an issue.
And on that note, there will be a box of masks on each bus as well. So if a child arrives at the bus stop without one, they won't be transported maskless. They will have that opportunity to mask up as soon as they get there. A couple other quick things. I know, we talked about the entrance and exit procedures and other mass clumpings of kind of kids. I know that there's different building protocols that will be sent out with opening to school, but it won't be the traditional rushes of children at the beginning and end of the day. Multiple doors will be used, buses will be dismissed in kind of sequence and go from there. The principals keep nodding, I'll keep going, and if you stop nodding, then I'll know that you have something to say. The same with parent drop-off pickup procedures, which door to drop my kids off at, busing procedures, allowing of carpools, again, that whole piece of taking some of the strain off our bus system. So again, some of that specific of which exit should I pick my kid up at, which entrance should I drop my kid off at. All of that is stuff that will be communicated at the building level. Great. Questions about temperature checks. Parents will be their first line of defense. There will be a message sent to parents each morning about your child's symptoms and temperatures. Questions about will there be temperature screening in school, and what happens if it's too high. I'm going to save the what happens if it's too high for Mr. Leibrock, and he's got some other what happens if a test or protected or a situation occurs. But yes, there will be some in-person temperature checks. We're still working on the logistics of that, when and where that's going to happen, how that's going to happen, making sure it happens at different times of the day. If a child spikes halfway through the day, a fever, something like that. So that is there. That would be a non-invasive, just the temporal kind of shooter scan that does that, or there's a temporal archway. There will be some sort of modified orientation opportunities for orientation, safety protocols, comfort building, meet with counselors, both on a group level, and then if a parent feels that their child needs one on an individual level, reach out to the building's main office, and we'll be able to make those connections. I also know that each of you are working on some sort of orientation, either video or photographs, so that kids know and parents know the environment the kids are going to go into prior to the start of school. That's the plan. Yes, keep nodding. Okay. I don't mean to give this short shift, but I'm also trying to get out of here on time. All right. So what happens to kids that won't wear masks or don't wear masks or participate in other safe behaviors? Some of that might be on purpose. Some of that might be defiant. Some of that might be due to the child's own age or disability. They just may not have the ability to remain as safe as we need them to be. So again, how are we going to address situations where children are not following all of our safety rules, either due to poor choices or questions of their own abilities to make good choices at times. Miss,
That one?
yeah, go ahead.
From the middle school, high school perspective, obviously, if the student has needs that's causing them, a medical reason or something to not wear a mask, that's something that would go through Mr. Plotkowitz's office, and we would look into what are potential accommodations and how to support that student. In regard to just students who, are refusing, they're not going to be in the building. We're not going to have that. We're not going to put anyone else at risk with a safety risk, kind of what I mentioned a little bit earlier. We're not going to look at it where we're going to, give these students consequences or anything like that, or detentions. We're not going to be punitive, but we're just going to help educate them and help them understand that, these are the safety reasons for it. But not only that, these are the guidelines that we're given. Some of these choices we're not making. We're just being told this is what you have to do. And ultimately, sometimes there's a time where you may not agree with what you have to do, but you have to do it. And that's just kind of the approach we're going to have. We're going to sit down, we're going to talk to them, we're going to educate them, try to come to us, parents. But we're not looking to allowing some students to off the schedule of their day, without their masks on. They're going to have to follow the expectations.
There was a question, are we going to give guidance on what styles or types of masks? And I know there's been some recent studies about that. So that and the number of masks that children should bring, odds are, for anyone who's worn a mask, more than one, especially at the elementary level, isn't going to be a bad idea. And again, we will always have extras available here in the building. In terms of the cleaning between Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday, the cleaning between periods, the cleaning between AM and PM, I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Wicks, our director of B&G, and also a specific question of are the products we're using have a kill time, a viral kill time that's shorter than the 4 minutes that we will be changing, or 4 or 5 minutes changing between classes. So making sure that we have a cleaning plan and cleaning products to turn this over the way we need to. Mr. Wicks.
Yeah, the products we're going to be using have a kill time anywhere between 1 and 5 minutes, and the product we're going to be using in between classes has a kill time of 1 minute. It's a peroxide-based product, and it again, we're as we get the classrooms arranged, like we're planning on, the plan is to just again go through dry runs and just see if we can get our cleaning practices down to less than 4 minutes. If it's going to take longer than 4 minutes, that's something that's going to be addressed as we go forward. The cleaning practices, again, with the hydrostatic sprayers, should cut down a lot on the time. The cleaning between morning and afternoon, there should be plenty of time with the help we have. And I know that's been a question as well with the amount of staffing we have. Again, the challenge, regardless of staffing, is going to be the 4 minute changeover. Wednesdays, they use the term deep cleaning for Wednesday. You could always clean more, just like if you're cleaning your house. We will be deep cleaning on Wednesday, but I wouldn't want anybody to think that the cleaning between a Monday and a Tuesday will be any different than somebody coming in on a like the building's going to be as clean on a Tuesday as it was on Monday, and it will be on Friday as it was on Thursday. And again, we're going to go deeper into our cleaning of the other areas as well. Restrooms have come up, and restrooms are going to be cleaned on schedule. I don't know if that's I've answered all the questions.
That's great. Basically, just so parents know that the main driver of everything we're doing is safety. We're actually doing trial runs of how to clean the classrooms, how long it takes, which order to do that in, training our staff on all of that. And that's going to be actually the driver of the education piece, that if we need to build another minute or two into the cleaning time, that's what's going to happen, because safety is going to trump everything. I would like
to comment on that, Mr. Manbretti. I'd just like to remind everyone who's listening that all of the cleaning protocols are in compliance with the CDC and the Department of Health. So they set the standard, and that's what guides us through our practices, as Mr. Wicks was saying, every day of the week. So we're deep cleaning. The phrase has been used in a lot of different ways, but the cleaning on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday is the same. So when we're in between morning and afternoon sessions at Parkdale, the cleaning process and procedures and the products that are used are the same that we'll be cleaning on Wednesday and Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday and Friday at the high school and middle school as well. Thank you.
Aware of the clock and aware of the number of questions I have left, my guess is we're going to go about 10 minutes long, but we're going to try and end the health and safety piece by 8:30, because that was our commitment to you. The only remaining piece will be odds and ends, which are some little kind of onesie-twosie type issues. Mr. Leibrock, I know you had a special meeting with Dr. Bernstein and a lot of questions that all just circle around what happens in the event of a positive case, a student, a teacher, quarantine. How are we going to determine between regular illness and COVID? What is the return protocol? Is there a special area for nurses? Is there a flow chart that nurses follow? So if you could just kind of, I know you work with our nurses directly, and you've also had that contact with Dr. Bernstein at the county. Talk to us about what's going to happen with a case or a suspected case, and where do we go from here? Oh, hang on. Nope. You're on mute. There you go.
Can you hear me this time? Okay, so I'll kind of take you through a little bit of the process of how something may happen. So we talked about temperature reading at the door, and if we have a high temperature reading, if we feel that it's an individual who is showing signs and symptoms, and our nurses we have an isolation room, and we would treat that as a positive case and have them come and picked up by their parents and seen by the doctor for them to be tested. But we also understand that if a kid's walking to school on a 80-degree day, or if they're walking to school on a 20-degree day and they're wearing a hat, they may walk in, the forehead may be a little bit hotter than normal. So we are going to use, I guess we'll say, our common sense when it comes to taking the temperature readings and understand certain situations when we're taking the temperatures of the kids as they're coming into the building. But our nurses have been working really closely with our school doctor to come up with our protocol for each of our buildings, to kind of understand their role in all of this and in treating this. And as you mentioned, one of the big things is kids have allergies, kids have a regular cold, regular flu, and a lot of those symptoms are similar to what we're seeing with what the people are reporting with COVID. And I think we're going to have to err on the side of caution here. We're not going to treat every case as a COVID case. We may need some documentation from your personal doctor to say that Susie or Billy has seasonal allergies, and we may need some supporting documentation if we do get to that point. But we'll have to treat those on a case-by-case basis, and our school nurse and our school doctor will work with the families to identify any situations that we may need to kind of have a heads up on. But if we do have a confirmed positive case, that's not going to be done by us. We're not doing any testing. Testing is voluntary, so we may recommend that somebody goes to get tested if they are showing signs and symptoms, they have a higher temperature if they're here in school. And we're going to wait for that test the test information to get back to us. And if we do receive a call from the Department of Health or someone's personal doctor stating that, or even the family themselves saying yes, somebody's positive, then it's kind of like a crime scene where we notified the Department of Health, and they just kind of come rushing in, and they're going to put up their yellow tape, and figuratively here, and they're going to be here, boots on the ground, and they have their contact tracing team. So we kind of just act as a support system for them as they go through that, but they're going to be coming in and kind of taking over and taking the lead on things. And so they're going to be the lead agency that handles all the calls and kind of take us through that process.
If I can just comment on that, I'm just very grateful to Dr. Bernstein for clarifying that, because we got some, I think, some misinformation from the state, and that's what that we're kind of dealing with on a daily basis, is that things do change. But when we spoke to her last Monday, it was very clear that schools won't be testing or doing the contact tracing. That will come through the Department of Health. Wherever you are in the state, your local Department of Health will take over, and that's their area of expertise, and that's the way it should be done. So we're really grateful that that's the process we'll be using moving forward.
And just to highlight, again, the broadness of our community, a number of questions about why aren't we testing kids more? We should be testing every kid. And don't you dare test my kid. I don't want any of my kids tested in school, no medical procedures. So again, just the reassurance to parents. The good news is, we're not medical experts. We're education experts, but the county has medical experts. We call them. We have if this, then that flow charts, and they swoop in and take it over. The good news is it's also not a district by district response. It's a county-wide standardized response that the county-wide COVID SWAT team, to use Matt Leibrock's analogy, is going to take over. And so that's reassuring to us that the folks who know this inside out and are going to do this district to district, community to community, are going to walk us through everything we need to know. And then just a question, obviously students carrying backpacks all day, just making sure that what's in the backpacks is appropriate and standard. I know they bring the backpacks in now, they go to the lockers, there's not a regular check of those, but that understanding that the safety continues to be a priority. Two super quick questions on building use and logistics. I know Mr. Wicks talked about how the bathrooms will be cleaned on a regular schedule. That schedule will be posted on the doors so that children know when it's going to be cleaned, and it's multiple times throughout the school day. The other one is a question about ventilation in the building. A lot of questions about filters. My understanding, Mr. Wicks, and you can just fill me in if I need to know more, is due to the community's generous support of all of our building projects, all of our filtration systems meet the standards laid out by the state, and on top of that, we've bought even better filters beyond that are going to actually be even better for that. Although I know some of the science is out, like everything, which mask, which filter, which this, which that, but we have everything ordered to exceed the standards of filtration in our learning spaces. Either unmute or
that is yeah, again, that is ever a fluid situation. Again, that they've changed that as within the last couple of days again. So we're just watching the guidance that comes out.
I'm hoping that I'm going to receive some additional information on that tomorrow, because as Doug was saying, there was some guidance. That guidance has changed, and so we're hoping to get a clarification on what types of filters we actually should be using, or even if our system is able to be adapted to that certain filtration system. So it's a complex process again, and as Doug said, it's fluid, but we're hoping that we will have an answer within the next day or so.
And then just a question regarding flexible transportation, parents who want to help out with the transportation burden, but understand that, certain days my kids can walk, or on good weather days, this or that. I would say at this point, sign up for transportation. We need to make sure you have a seat for it, but work with your building principal and the rest. And that's going to be one of those case by case things that we can't address fully in a forum like this. That brings us to the end of both health and safety and buildings and logistics. I have just a couple little things that I've called odds and ends, and were things that are just kind of homeless in the rest of the categories. And we'll just kind of do a little lightning round and see if we can end this evening on an informative and positive and quick note here. Mr. Roberts, a bunch of questions about the impact on the relationship between the high school and Ormsby, the students that participate in the Ormsby programs.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Membretti. So the Ormsby program is following a very similar schedule, actually the exact same schedule as East Aurora High School, as many of the schools that send students to the Ormsby Center. So we see our relationship during this hybrid approach being seamless.
Just a question, is the district hiring additional nurses? At this point, our district feels the nurses we have plus the district physician have a good plan, but obviously we're going to continue to watch the numbers and the burden on them as routine and regular stuff happens, but also obviously depending on how the path of the virus goes. We know that the kids come because of their amazing educational experience and their classroom experience, but for some kids, it's the extras that keep them going. So real quick questions about ALC, ELT, clubs, virtual clubs. If running, can both in-person and virtual kids participate? And then I know it's kind of a standalone. I'll turn back to Mr. Leibrock for sports. So can we talk about clubs, ELT, ALC, maybe detention? I don't know. All those kind of beyond the classroom type things, and then we'll bump to sports.
Yep. At the high school, our ALC, as Mr. Mambredi was referring to, is the Academic Learning Center. And our clubs, as I mentioned, we will, the ALC will be up and running eventually. We are going to use the first couple of weeks to get our schedule down, and then we'll start introducing things such as the Academic Learning Center and our clubs. I think those could probably start within the first week or two because we'll be using Wednesday for those groups to meet. But we're going to have a slow transition, get the instruction down first, and then slowly introduce our clubs and our Academic Learning Center at the high school.
I would echo that at the middle school. We're also looking at implementing ELT as quickly as possible because we understand that's an important resource for students. Probably a little bit of a delay in some of the clubs, however.
And then, Mr. Leibrock, I know the sports are very important to a lot of kids and their parents. Can you talk with it's not our decision, but what has the state decided on sports?
Sure. So they're actually set to start next week, but they delayed them until September 21st. So right now, that's the standing date for the start of fall sports is Monday, September 21st. In the latest release from the governor's office, there was no change in sports. So right now, we're sticking with that date. There is an alternative plan. So if the state, the governor, or somebody tells us that we can't play fall sports this year, the New York State Public High School Athletic Association does have a plan B, if you call it that, to have the fall sports played in 2021, the spring, sometime between probably March and June of 2021.
And at this time, because fall sports are just postponed, they're not canceled, there is still sports for PE at the high school as an option, but obviously as the days tick on, we're going to have to look at that and keep aware of it. Excellent. Questions? I know we talked about how school supply lists are being revised, but parents had questions about school supply lists and more importantly, their kids' schedule. Other than we're moving as quick as we can, do we have any updates on student schedules and updated supply lists?
I believe all supply lists are updated at this point at the middle school, and we're working very hard to get the scheduling process done. Can't make any promises. We're hoping by the end of next week. We understand that that's a little bit of a delay. We apologize for that, but I could assure you that once we have it figured out, we'll make sure you know.
High school community service, with everything going on, that's currently on pause, and that students will not be penalized for that. If the situation changes, we'll go from there. Excellent. Questions about lockers being used. Questions about, as the weather turns, will the question about lockers being used be revisited, or will kids have to carry their winter coats? And we will revisit that as we go, but as now, we're asking kids to bring minimum school supplies with them, travel with their backpack, and then as situations change and hopefully the path of the virus gets better, we'll revisit that. Okay. Big question, important question. Any changes to your start or end times and possibilities for early drop off? Mr. Roberts, any changes to your start or end time? I know there's some shuffling within the day, but you're good. Mr. Brown, any changes? No. Ms. Leibrock? Well, you're doing, yeah, Mr. Leibrock, Lions, I'm looking at both of you. It's been a long day, both. Obviously, you're doing the half-day model, and that has its specific times.
Yeah, those are on my reopening plan, and we will probably have some flexibility for early drop-off, at least for the morning session. But again, I'm waiting for some transportation logistics and aid schedules to make sure I have coverage and a place for this early drop-off to go.
Excellent. Mr. Russ, because their students are not going to be here full time, any chance of a tax rebate or credit with the money we're saving? Anything that can help parents offset childcare?
No, actually, our costs associated with reopening school have actually gone up considerably. We've spent tens of thousands of dollars on PPE to prepare to create the safest environment for our students and our faculty. And so there really is no possibility, unfortunately, of a tax rebate or credit. The same thing for childcare, unfortunately. That is an expense that will have to be picked up by our parents. I know that it's certainly not easy, but it's just I guess it's just in response to trying to create a hybrid model that we feel is in the best interests of our students. I know it's not completely convenient, but we feel it certainly is the best model to go with at this time.
And that brings us to the end of our prepared or submitted questions. A couple of points of order before I toss it back to Mr. Russ to land this plane, and that's purely a dig at his headgear. Mine too. This entire recording will be posted online on the website as soon as it's done, as was the one this morning. They were mostly similar, but there were some different emphasis or different questions. Tomorrow morning, there's another one at 8 o'clock. Again, the same format. If you have questions that weren't answered, you have the ability to submit those questions. Instead of using that form, I'm going to ask you to submit them to reopen at eak12.org, reopen at eak12.org. That's something you can use for tomorrow's live stream. You can present that in such a way that I will bring it then, but that website, that email address will stay open the entirety of the school year and will be monitored and sent to the appropriate person. So if you know who needs to answer your question, ask them. If you don't know who needs to answer your question, ask it to reopen at EAK12. Know that we're here to support you. In addition, for further discussion and detail of the 3 PowerPoints that went out, number one, the 3 PowerPoints are presented on the website in their entirety. But if you go to the board admin retreat link, you will see a further discussion about all 3 models. You'll be able to forward to your children's school part and have more of an in-depth discussion, followed by some questions for the board regarding the schools individually and the district as a whole. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Russ to kind of land this plane and bring this virtual reopening meeting to a close.
Sure. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for being here with us tonight and for sharing your questions and concerns. I think it's really helpful to go through this process. It's not easy, but I think through our dialogue and continued support of one another, we'll be able to not only get through it, but create right now a hybrid model that is going to be really effective for our students, with the ability to change to a remote model as necessary. And our hope is to come back in a full return model sometime this school year. Again, it's been a very good process. Our task force have worked hard, and that work from the task force allowed set the foundation for us to build this current model, which we think is going to be quite successful. Again, thank you for being here and have a good evening.